So there's no pressure being the very first one, right? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. And thank you for coming out and supporting this tonight. I mean, this is an amazing turnout. We had discussions internally. As you know, RSVPs don't always equal people that actually show up. So we are more than thrilled that the community has been so supportive. So if you enjoy it tonight, maybe not my part, maybe our next speaker, but come out and support us again. And again, thank you to Triaxiom for helping make this happen. That's huge, 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 huge. All right, so tonight, the talk I'm giving, it is entitled, Protecting Yourself from People Like Me. So my name is Chris Horner. I work for Revix Security. I'm a pen tester, and I do social engineering tests as part of my job. So to be successful with a social engineering campaign, a social engineering test, of course, just like a regular pen test, you have to mimic things that a bad actor does, right? So when you're putting together a campaign, your communication has to appear authentic, and it has to be something that looks familiar to people. And again, it's the same mindset and the same tactics that a bad actor would use. So we're gonna look at how information is collected online, how it can be used or misused, as the case may be. But then we're going to look at ways of how we can take back control of that information, especially on a personal level, in order to continue protecting our privacy. So I believe in awareness. I don't believe in scare tactics, but I believe it's important to be aware of what goes on, and then we can make our own decisions about what we do or do not want to have sitting out there. So, you know, if you're in the business world, you understand a business risk model. You get a pen test report, there's a finding, maybe you accept the risk for whatever reason, that's fine. So kind of have that mindset as we're going through this, but on more of a personal level. So we're going to start with what is OSINT. OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. All that means is that this is information you can find without having to hack into anything. It's out there if you know how to find it. So think of it like a jigsaw puzzle, right? If you have all the pieces kind of spread out in front of you, you pick up one piece, it doesn't really mean anything, right? But then you start putting other pieces together and you start to form a picture. And then eventually you put all the pieces together and you have an entire picture. Then the more pieces you put together, that can give clues to where these other pieces go. And so you start assembling the whole picture faster. That's basically the same way that OSINT research works. You just start, it's usually with an internet browser. If you're looking up somebody or something, what does that usually lead to? Usually to their social media profiles and their posts. Now, if you start looking through those, because people like to run their mouth, right? So you can start to get an idea of what people are interested in and what they like to talk about. The issue, though, sometimes people run their mouth a little too much. And if you think about questions that are out there for password resets, for example, names of pets, kids, schools, whatever, you can start to see that information through some of their posting. Sometimes they do you the courtesy of filling it out right in their profile. So beyond that, we're all cyber nerds here, right? So as we probably know, 90% of the internet is deep web. Deep web is different than the dark web, of course. What deep web refers to is that information that's out there on the internet, it's just not indexed by the search engines. So this is the information that, if you know where to go to find it, it's publicly accessible. And one of my favorite examples of that is county and state tax records. It can be amazing what kind of information is sitting out there. If you know where to look, and it depends on the locale, you can find out things like people's mortgage. You can look at the recorded deeds. You can see what kind of car they drive, sometimes their license plate, all sorts of things that can be uncovered. So when all this information is gathered and put together, what can be found out? Well, I mean, pretty much anything you need to dox somebody. You know, the personal information, dates of birth. And again, this is not hacking at anything, and we're not even talking about dark web data breaches. This is all just what is publicly accessible. So all these different things are out there. Online reviews. Online reviews is always one of my favorite things too, because again, people like to run their mouth. And that can start to give clues not only to people's interests, but also things that they own. So say somebody likes to collect rare wristwatches, for example. They're on Rolex forums, showing off pictures of their watch and so forth, talking about that. Say they have a very unique username. People like to reuse their username, right? And if it's unique enough, it can make it very simple to pinpoint somebody specifically. And combine it with all that other information that we just looked at, you can start to see where problems arise. So as an example of that, we're going to analyze this douchey picture from Instagram. So first of all, nobody holds a steering wheel like that. The guy's obviously showing off his watch. But let's see what we can figure out just from this picture. Obviously, the dude's driving a Ferrari. That's obvious. But what model Ferrari? If you do an image search on the dashboard, it's a Ferrari 458. We know that because the red line on the tachometer is 9,000 RPM. Later models that use the same dashboard have a twin turbo engine with a lower red line. You can look at the upper left, you can see the curve of the yellow fender up there. So we're looking for a yellow Ferrari 458 with a tan interior. But we can't see the license plate on the car in front of him. But if you look at the radio station list on the right side, we can tell that he's in Miami. It says Miami right on there. That matches with the palm trees that we see in the background. Then, of course, we've got his Rolex GMT Master 2 watch that he's showing off. But even if you look in the reflection in the center of the steering wheel, in the black trim piece that's on there, you can tell it's some white dude with a short haircut. So even in a city like Miami, which is soaked in supercars, there's only going to be so many yellow over tan Ferrari 458s. And if you notice in the picture too, there's no roof. So it's a convertible. That narrows it down even more. So this kind of analysis actually applies to businesses too. One of the social engineering tests I was doing before, I was trying to come up with a campaign, and I was researching our client's logo. I did a reverse image search on the logo and found that it led back to an HR software company's website. Why would it do that? Well, because they very helpfully put a testimonial out there talking about how happy they were with the HR software. Guess what the social engineering campaign became? This was a medical company. It was near the beginning of the year when we're all checking the boxes for compliance and everything. So I copied the HR software company's login page, sent out a phishing email. The company name, it was companyname.org. I bought companyname.com, set up the subdomain for HR, emailed the company, got back a response. Now I had the corporate signature format as well. Sent it out, 500 emails, got over 80 hits, people putting their credentials into my fake site. Company was not amused. But that's how these things happen. You know, if you get a determined enough criminal, they're going to look for clues like that. It worked because it was something that the people were already familiar in seeing. It made sense in the business context, and that's how we have problems. So I went through and I picked on some poor dude who shared the same name as me. This was stuff I was able to find out about him, where he lives, how old he is, phone numbers, social media profiles, his relatives, his neighbors, how long he's lived in his house, how much the house is worth, what his approximate income is, and even aliases that he might go by. So one of the very first versions of this talk I gave at a Queen City security meetup. And it occurred to me the morning of before I was about to give the talk, it's always better to show and not tell, right? So I put these together. No exaggeration, took less than 10 minutes to find all that information on this one particular person. It took longer to make these slides and redact them than it did to find out the information. Here's why all of this matters. We talked a little bit before about password reset questions. Are things we're putting out there giving clues to things like that? Have you ever had to prove who you are to a credit bureau? Credit bureau especially. They're going to ask you things about mortgages, current previous addresses, things like that. Information that could be obtained. Ever had to deal with a stalker? I don't want to sound sexist, but that does disproportionately tend to affect women. I myself had this happen at one point. It was annoying, but in a lot of other situations, it can be very serious and unfortunately sometimes deadly. So on that note too, this is a part where I give a public service announcement during the talk. So I have teenage daughters, and anybody who thinks about asking them out, I hope they see the recording and know who I am and what I do, because I am that dad. They will not be able to hide anything from me. And then finally, these sites that have this information, did you actually agree to let these sites aggregate this information? Well, we did, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So another war story about how this could be a problem. There was another social engineering test I was doing, and it was a certain client, and they take security very seriously. Everything we told them to do, they would do. So when the social engineering test came up, it consisted of a phishing test and a vishing test, and they had a particular request. They wanted me to call the help desk and have somebody's password reset. Okay, cool. But it was almost a black box test. They didn't give me the phone number to the help desk. All I had was a spreadsheet of employees I was either allowed to impersonate or allowed to call. So went through those, found who, at least according to LinkedIn, was the newest employee on that list. I was able to uncover an HR phone number for this company. And I called them, spoofed this employee's phone number, said, hey, I know this is the wrong place. I'm new. I think I screwed up my computer. How do I reach the help desk? Oh, just call 888, blah, 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 blah. Cool, thank you. So now I have that phone number that I can use for spoofing too. So then I called the help desk on that phone number, again, spoofing the same employee. Hey, I think I screwed up my computer. Can you help me reset my password? Of course we can, no problem. What's the phone number? What's your phone number? Pass that validation. They said, great. What is your date of birth and last four of your social to finish the request? Maybe not so easy, right? So I kind of put that one on the back burner, started on the phishing test, couldn't get anywhere with that. Usually I'm pretty good at beating spam filters for corporations. It wasn't happening. I tried 3 different domains. I've tried every trick in the book I knew. Couldn't get any of the phishing emails through. So then I switched to the vishing test. I started calling employees, pretending to be the IT help desk, because remember, I had that phone number now. And I was trying to remote into their system using the Quick Assist app on Windows. One of my favorite tricks that I learned from Wild West Hacking Fest. Well, they had actually disabled Quick Assist on their systems. The first time I'd ever seen them do that before, I was like, oh my God. So now the test is running out, and time is running out for the test. And when I was doing the vishing calls, I did find one guy, God bless him. He just wanted to be so helpful. And he's like, no, it's really not working. But anyway, so I took a step back. It's like, okay, let's focus on what I can do versus what I can't. I know the policy and procedure. I have phone numbers I can spoof. So I know what information that I need. Now, this particular individual, he had a very unique Eastern European name, and I could figure out the metro market that he worked in. So I knew I needed those 2 pieces of information, date of birth, last 4 of the social. So I started going through his social media profiles looking for happy birthday messages. Guy didn't have any. I mean, he had some social media out there, but he wasn't active on it. There was almost nothing there. All right. So, great, I'm dealing with the ghost. But then I started going through some of those public records like we were talking about before, and data broker sites. And between a couple of those different sources, I pieced together what was probably the date of birth. So I called him back, and I said, hey, it's me again from help desk. We spoke the other day. Oh, yeah. I said, remember when we couldn't get the Quick Assist stuff to work on your system? Yeah. I said, I think I know what the problem is. We migrated to database. You know how when you call in, you have to verify date of birth, last 4 of social? Oh, yeah. I said, some of the records might have gotten messed up. So let me just make sure we have the right info. I said, I got your date of birth is 12/21/72. Yep, that's right. Perfect. Last 4 of your social, 7896. Numbers I made up. No, that's not right. So then I said, well, there's the problem. And then dropped the $1 million question. What should it be? And he told me. But he felt comfortable enough, right? Because the phone number I was calling from matched one he was familiar with. I knew the information for their policy and procedure, and I had half the information already. So I had both pieces, called the help desk, spoofed his number, got the password reset, of course ran into MFA, it was pushed to approve, MFA bombed, he approved it, and that's how you hack a Fortune 500 company. And that, again, was all from just publicly available information. So there's a Netflix movie called Anon. I'm not going to say it's the best piece of cinematography ever, but it's a movie about a surveillance state. Everything is recorded, everything's accessible forever. And Amanda Seyfried's character here, she has figured out how to disrupt this process. She's figured out how to live in plain sight and also erase these memories that are always collected together. So Clive Owen plays opposite her. He asked her at the end of the movie, said, "Why is it so important for you to stay invisible?" And I like the quote that she said. She said, "It's not that I have anything to hide. I have nothing that I want you to see." And isn't that kind of the point? So earlier we spoke about personal risk model, and that's exactly it. I'm betting all of us here, none of us are doing anything wrong. We really don't have any big secrets to hide. But that doesn't necessarily mean we want people going through our lives either. So let's take a minute and talk about how we even got here in the first place. Where did all this information come from that ended up out there? Well, we talked about social media. Again, we kind of did that to ourselves. But even stuff that like when we sign up for rewards programs, because we wanted free side of guac at Chipotle, for example, games we play on social media, mailing lists that we're on, even data that is being leaked by the apps from our phone or our computer, our web browsing history, things we buy on our credit cards, public records like we talked about, and services that we used. All of this information is collected together and sliced and diced 87,000 different ways by brokers and marketers and sold to the highest bidder over and over and over and over again. So all of this is legal. We'll leave the ethical question for another discussion. But if you want to deep dive into how the data broker industry worked, a couple years ago, John Oliver did a really in-depth piece about it. And if you haven't seen it, it's really good. It's about 20 minutes long, but he goes through and dissects far better than I ever could exactly how these organizations work and what they're doing with the data. And in true John Oliver fashion, he does something very funny with it at the end, which I won't spoil. But sometimes the consequences of this data collection hit in ways we may not even think of. So I'm going to pick on the telehealth industry for now. Telehealth became really big during the COVID crisis, right? Made sense. You know, we couldn't go anywhere, but people still needed medical care, still had conditions they were dealing with. You know, we couldn't get out, things still had to get done. So this study examined 50 of the largest telehealth companies and found that 49 of them were selling data when people were visiting the site or filling out questionnaires. So even aside from COVID, if somebody has a medical concern, what are they typically going to do at first? They'll probably Google it, look at their symptoms, try to see if they can kind of figure out what's going on, maybe decide if they're going to go to a doctor or not. And if somebody is doing that kind of research or engaging with the website on for a medical matter, they're probably going to assume that they're covered by HIPAA, right? Wouldn't that be a correct assumption? But here's the thing. HIPAA applies to medical providers. A doctor is a medical provider. Telehealth service is not a medical provider. They may boast about being HIPAA compliant on their site, but that's not a guarantee that they are. So the things that they found, 49 of the 50 were selling web browsing history that was being collected from visitors to the site. 13 of them were selling the answers that people had filled out in questionnaires. Now, the thing is, some of these questionnaires are very sensitive topics. Say some of them were, people were looking for help about depression, suicidal thoughts. Some people were asking about addiction, substance, alcohol. You think they might have made a different choice if they knew that those answers were being sold off to marketers so they could be sold more things to? It's kind of gross. That's why I hate data brokers. Now, the rest of the article, if you go look it up, there's some back and forth. The telehealth company said, oh, well, we're going to do things a little bit differently going forward, or we stopped doing that, or, well, we didn't fully understand the tool that we had, which is always the wrong answer. And then you had the big tech company on the other side, Meta, Google, saying, well, we really discourage sending health stuff through our tools. And, well, we can filter it. May not always work. Point is, how do we know? We don't know. Unless we're working for those companies in that field, we don't know how that data is being collected and being used. Then on the other side, too, it seems like on a daily basis, we're hearing about some new data breach, the things that are going on, and we're the ones as consumers that are left to clean up that mess. We got to deal with the consequences of all of that, too. And we haven't even got into dark web data breaches or bad actors taking that information and misusing it. Now, another one, Fog Data Science. What this company does is they gather and sell geolocation data from phones. So, and it's by device ID. They say this data is anonymized. And what's more concerning is that law enforcement accesses this data, and they don't even need a warrant for it. That's who their primary customer is. So even if the data is anonymous, say the device ID that's being tracked is in the same location every day from, say, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., combine it with everything else we talked about, how anonymous is that? So when I put this part in this presentation, it's actually been a couple years. But with the things going on in today's world, you can see where that can become alarming. So that's a disease. What's a cure? Well, if you want to get rid of this data, and if you want to minimize the digital footprint, here's some things you can do. First step, just Google yourself. See what comes up. If you find your information on a data broker website, there's an opt-out page that you can request that record be deleted. It actually works. I've gone through this process myself. They don't always make the opt-out page easy to find. It can be very tricky because remember, you're messing with their money. So sometimes they require a reason that you need to give them in order for it to be opted out. Some reasons that usually work are you work in law enforcement and you're afraid of retaliation, or you've been the victim of identity theft, or you've been the victim of a stalker or harassment. So when I did this, I used stalker and harassment and identity theft. Never asked to prove the reason. If you have qualms about stretching the truth, in case none of those situations apply to you, remember, Equifax lost control of all of your data, so we're all victims of identity theft. So there you go. This also, it's not a one and done process either. You have to keep going back and looking. And I'll give an example of this. I'm going to pick on LinkedIn now. So they actually rolled out an update not too long ago where they said, oh, I'm sorry, Brenton, that's Microsoft product. They rolled out an update not too long ago that said they can train their AI on anything that you do, your content, any interaction that you have with the platform. And they enabled it on by default. And it was slid in there through an update. So if you didn't know, you didn't know, but you had to go in and turn it off. So it's things like that that keep happening too, because companies are so accustomed to vacuuming up all of our data, to them it's just a normal course of business. Other things you can do, look at the permissions you're enabling on your phone or computer applications. You know, if you like playing a certain game, why does the race car game need access to your contact list? You know, does that card game really need to know where you are all the time? So kind of start thinking through those things. And then services you use for convenience. You know, take a minute and kind of think behind what that convenience might cost you. Again, we're talking about personal risk models here. And then, of course, privacy-based browsers can help prevent some of this tracking, Brave, Firefox, or adding certain extensions to whatever your browser of choice is. So here's where it gets a little bit of fun. Now you kind of know how this data collection happens, right? So go out there and screw with the algorithm. So, start putting in fake information, or if you're researching yourself and trying to reduce your footprint, if you find wrong information, just leave it out there. So I do this a lot. Especially places, okay, it doesn't work on banks and stuff like that, but if you want to sign up for a rewards program, great, do it. They have to know your date of birth? Are they really going to check it? Probably not. So I like screwing with it. I use April Fools, and August 29th, 1997. If you know why the August one is funny, find me later. It means you're as big a nerd as I am. And then I screw with the year by an order of decades. And now I get stuff in the mail for AARP. So it works. I'm old, but I'm not that old. And then spin the narrative in your favor. So then you take more control over it. You put out there what you want people to find out about you. There's certain mailing lists I like to stay up to date on, cars. And so there's certain ones that I make sure that I can be contacted for those things. So once you kind of learn how to do this and take that control, it becomes much nicer. This just kind of scratches the surface of everything. If you want to go deeper, and I'm going to give the disclaimer, neither myself, my employer, DC704, Triaxiom, nobody cares if you use these resources or not. These are just ones that I found to be helpful, and maybe they'll be helpful for you as well. But nobody benefits if you use any of these or not. Heath Adams, he's probably a very familiar name to most of us in here. He's got an entire OSINT course on YouTube that's free. 4.5 hours of training, and he's got some other smaller videos as well where you can do challenges. So if you want to brush up your OSINT skills, see how good you are, that's a cool place to kind of go and test those things out. If you want to go all in, Ange Brown, also from TCM Security, she created a certification with a test. And I took it. It's fantastic. It's really good. It's really in-depth. You have to understand a lot of different OSINT techniques. You solve certain problems, and then you also have to write a professional report about it as well. I thought it was a really fun test. Michael Bazell, he runs a website called inteltechniques.com, and he treats this topic like it's a blood sport. So one of the cool free resources on his site is he's got a whole list of data brokers. And if you're trying to remove your information from those, you can go through and check those off. You can go there, see if your information's on there. He even shows how to get it off of there. That's all free. He does have a book called Extreme Privacy. It's also fantastic, and he goes super in-depth into things. I mean, he covers things as deep as burner phones and how to hide real estate ownership from people that you don't want to see, not tax people, not the government, but from the casual observer. But his clients tend to be extremely high-profile individuals, and this is the playbook he uses to keep them private. If you don't feel like going through and doing the manual work yourself to delete it, there are services that will do this for you. 3 of them I'm showing here, and I'll explain why in a second. Delete Me, Canary, and Opteri. So yes, those are paid services, but each of them, they offer a lot of free resources on their site that you can use to do this project yourself. And they also offer free trials, and one, Canary, even offers a free tier of their service. So because of all the free resources that these companies provide, I decided to include them here as well. So that's what I got for you tonight. But if, I know a lot of you here already, but if we're not connected on LinkedIn, please reach out. I'll also be around for the rest of the evening. And on LinkedIn, I tend to talk about pen testing, OSINT, and sports cars I can't afford. So again, thanks for coming out tonight, and appreciate your attention.